The age of men is over. The time of the orc has come.
Hello everyone, No One of Consequence here, back again with a new video. Well, orcs, or lack of them, have been all the internet rage for the last couple of days, so I figured I'd better chime in on the subject. A couple of days ago, Fandom Pulse published an article with this headline: Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2025 removes orcs. And here are the important extracts from that article. The most important change to the Monster Manual is the section on orcs was removed entirely from the new edition, whereas the last edition had 4 pages of information on the evil monsters. Now they're only mentioned in an appendix table aimed at converting them to new monsters. It appears as if the Monster Manual doesn't understand monsters at all in the new woke edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And as usual, videos about the controversy soon began appearing on YouTube. No more orcs, says John Delarose. Orcs removed from Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual, says Clownfish. He calls them out, again, says John Delarose. So who is this he that John Delarose is referring to? Well, it's Rob Kuntz, whom I have often mentioned in previous videos. Again, Rob is pretty much the last man standing among those who were around when the Dungeons & Dragons game was being conceived. Grums, who is always on top of these things, tweeted this: Half-Elves gone from the new D&D Player's Handbook. D&D 2024 has done so much damage to Dungeons & Dragons thanks to Wizards of the Coast's woke designers. Removes half-elves from the game due to its being somehow racist. What, are they about racial purity now? How is that not even more racist? Removes half-orcs, same reason. Removes orcs as monsters from the Monster Manual, because they think orcs are black people, but it's okay, they made them Mexican in their new art instead. None of this was offensive to anyone. Their virus-infected brains are out of control and spinning racism where there is none. To which Rob Kuntz, who is apparently a very early riser, replied with this: They are now a species in the Player's Handbook, from what I understand. Orcs, born of Tolkien, understood to be specially tortured and changed elves and mutated life forms, born for pure evil purposes by wizardry and monsters in kind, have now been added to civil society as just another species occurring in the evolutionary chain. They were just misunderstood all along, you see, and it is now your fault not to recognize that when they are slipping a blade into you. Utter drivel. Creative hackery at its best. A literary appropriation and postmodern obliteration of Tolkien's work and efforts now being made a mockery of on the world stage. A little while later, Kuntz added this: WotC is, in fact, the appropriators of once understood and accepted culture, historical and now literary. If I were a literary estate of a major fantasy fiction author, I would go nowhere near WotC, as they would likely remake such works from them in their worldview and not as intended by the author. So Rob Kuntz says it's his understanding that orcs are now a species in the new Player's Handbook. Well, that book was released last fall in September of 2024. I do not own a copy myself, but can anyone confirm if what Rob Kuhn says is true? Are orcs now just another species, similar to what was referred to in old Dungeons and Dragons as demi-humans? In the old versions of the game, demi-humans were things like elves, dwarves, gnomes, and halflings. Meanwhile, orcs, goblins, hobgoblins, etc. were all considered monsters and were collectively referred to as humanoids. So my question is, are orcs considered demi-humans now as well? And are they a playable species along with the others I mentioned? Either way, it really doesn't matter, because the dirty little secret is you are always able to play an orc as a character, or any other creature for that matter, as long as you're DM approved. This passage is from the Men in Magic booklet, which was part of original Dungeons & Dragons published in 1974. Other character types. There is no reason that players cannot be allowed to play as virtually anything, provided they begin relatively weak and work up to the top. Now, the example cited here is a dragon, but if you can have a dragon player character, then certainly you could have an orc as well. Or, if you didn't want an orc player character, they were still a viable option for employing as NPC men-at-arms. This passage is from the Greyhawk supplement to original Dungeons & Dragons, published in 1975. Men-at-arms. Hired fighters can be men, dwarves, or elves. Chaotic characters may wish to employ orcs. Now, the reason that orcs are employable in this way is because they are somewhat intelligent and they are lawful in nature. This is the entry for orcs as found in the first edition D&D Monster Manual, published in 1977. You can see I've highlighted there, their intelligence is rated at average, and their alignment is lawful evil. And this elaboration on orcs was added to the second edition D&D Monsters Compendium, published in 1989. Says they will cooperate with other species, but are not dependable. If great patience and care is used, orc tribes can be effective trading partners and military allies. A surprisingly nuanced approach to orcs indeed. For a good example of Gygax's take on orcs, this encounter is found in Dungeon Module G1, Steading of the Hill Giant Chief, published in 1978. It says Orc Slave Quarters. You can read the details there. There are a couple of injured orcs. But it says that they will happily aid a party which will spare their lives and set them free. These orcs know about the rebellion in the dungeons, and they will tell the party that any orcs they see there should be hailed as friends. And this is a location referred to, which is found on the dungeon level of the steading, a natural cavern. It is now inhabited by 78 escaped orc slaves, rebels against the hill giants, for whom this place is a sanctuary. If approached in a non-hostile manner, they will become agreeable if fighting against bugbears and/or giants is mentioned. And negotiating an alliance with the rebel orcs is exactly what my current group of players did when they went through this module a few years ago. This screenshot shows them speaking to the leaders of the rebel orcs. And this screenshot shows the characters marshaling their army of orc rebels before leading them in an assault on the hill giant lair. For full details of my players' adventures in the hill giant steading, you can see my campaign replay series, beginning with episode 29. Moving on, here is another example of orcs being more than just mindless cannon fodder in early Dungeons & Dragons. This paragraph is Gary Gygax explaining how the Temple of Elemental Evil played out in his personal campaign. In part, he says this: Robilar arrived on his carpet of flying and then set off into the temple depths, leaving his trusty orc hero Quij to guard the transport device and a pair of griffins. So who is this Robilar character that Gygax was DMing for, and who had an orc henchman? Well, it's Rob Kuntz, as highlighted here. As a D&D player, Kuntz developed the character of Robilar, the first character to successfully complete the Tomb of Horrors. So as you can see, even Rob Kuntz himself did not regard orcs as mere soulless cannon fodder, even back in the earliest days of Dungeons & Dragons. And the reason he didn't is because Gygax didn't either. I say all this to say, nothing that WotC is doing with orcs today is particularly new or stunning and brave. The concept and groundwork was laid down by Gygax more than 50 years ago. So, once again, WotC is merely standing on the shoulders of giants while crowing about how much further they can see than did their predecessors. I'll just close by asking this. Which version of orcs depicted here would you rather have in your campaign world? Which version is more interesting? Which version invokes a sense of adventure and danger, of heroic battles and glory? I certainly know which version I would choose. Alright, well that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment and let me know what you think. If you know of a good place, please share the video. And anything you can do to help support the channel, I appreciate it. Thanks again. Bye for now.
Give the people what they